Okay, chapter 13, Parasitism. Admittedly, this chapter is a bit gross. But actually, in prepping for this, I was reflecting on something my graduate advisor mentioned, which, and as I mentioned in the last lecture, he was one of Bob Payne's students. So, intertitled kelp forest ecologist, pretty well known in his field, but he... I was one of his last grad students, so he's kind of at the end of his career, and we did a little parasite study on Donax, this small clam in Southern California, with an undergrad, and wrote a little paper about it. And he mentioned if he had to do his career over again, he would have studied parasites. And I think that in general, we underestimate the role that parasites play in shaping ecosystems. And it's interesting here, they do include diseases along with parasites, and there's obviously some current events associated with that. But I think in general, it's not that well understood how important parasites are in ecology. And part of that's because it's one of those things where if a parasite weakens a host and that host gets eaten by something else, we say, oh, it's predation, where if that individual wasn't weakened by the parasite, that might not have happened, right? And so this is like ultimate versus proximate causes, that parasites are really, really important in the ecosystem, and they're disgusting and fascinating at the same time. At least that's my opinion, and admittedly, I was a bit squirmish reading through this chapter. So the key concepts for this chapter are that parasites typically feed on only one or a few host species, but the host species have multiple parasite species, meaning that parasites tend to specialize on a single host or type of host, where one host, an organism, may have multiple types of parasite species at any given time. Hosts have mechanisms for defending themselves against parasites, and parasites have mechanisms for overcoming those host defenses. Again, the arms race. Host and parasite populations can evolve together, each in response to selection pressure imposed by the other. Hosts and parasites can have important effects on each other's population dynamics, and parasites can alter the outcome of species interactions, thereby causing community change. This is a gross one. So, it's a worm that infests not crickets. What are those things called? Crickets. Yeah, I'm getting crickets and grasshoppers confused. And it makes it jump into the water. And a cricket. Yeah, cricket. I said cricket. And basically makes the cricket jump into the water, and so it can crawl out of the host and complete its life cycle. There's another really cool example of a barnacle that parasitizes crabs, typically king crabs and I think snow crabs, and does the same thing where it takes control of them and turns them into sort of a zombie. It's really gross stuff. So that's the hairworm life cycle. The cricket drinks water that contains the hairworm larva, which enters the cricket's body and feeds on its tissues, growing into an adult that fills the cricket's body cavity. Then the cricket jumps into the water, drowns, and the hairworm emerges and mates. In this example, they would save crickets that jumped into the water and put them, back out of the water, and they would immediately jump back in. Like how? How? How does this worm do this? How does this worm control the cricket to make it jump into water and drown? I think it's gross, but it happens. So these parasites enslave their hosts. Some fungi alter perching behavior of their fly hosts, so their spores can be dispersed more easily after the fly dies. Rats infested with Toxoplasma gondii don't avoid cats. They're even attracted to cats, which increases the chance of the parasites transmitted to the host, a cat. I meant to look up Toxoplasma Toxoplasma. Let me look that up because there was an interesting fact I wanted to talk about. Okay, I'm back. The literature is a bit varied and it's controversial about the role of Toxoplasma in humans. However, this study is citing, there it is, sorry. Latent toxoplasmosis is very common chronic parasite infection caused by the protozoan parasite Toxoplasma gondii, and has been estimated prevalence of 30 to 70% among human populations worldwide. Meaning this parasite that causes rats to run towards mice so they get eaten and then the cats are the host is prevalent in humans between 30 to 70% of the worldwide population. That is insane. 30 to 70% of the worldwide population is infected with Toxoplasma. There's a couple studies that say there's a behavioral change. There's some that don't. This one's kind of pointing to that there's not. A reaction time is what they were using, but they also did like brain scans to look at Toxoplasma positive and negative people. Pretty crazy stuff. So 37% of the worldwide population is infected with Toxoplasma. That's a huge number. So it's likely, like, if you have a cat, you probably have Toxoplasma. Or if you go to that, what's that? There's the Nico. Yeah, Nico, the cat cafe that just opened. If you go hang out there, you're going to get Toxoplasma. Whether or not it'll impact you, it's still unclear. But it's yet one of another parasite that we probably have. This spore one is crazy. This is the yellow dung fly infected with a fungus, which makes them move to the downward side of the plant and then latch on. And then when they die, then it helps the spores disperse through the wind to get on other yellow dung flies. More than half of the world species are symbionts, organisms that live in or on other organisms. Our bodies are habitat for many other species. These symbionts can be mutualists or parasites. This is showing all the different places where we can have parasites, or symbionts rather. Many of them are parasites. So we do have, like, our intestinal gut bacteria can be good. Of course, there's other things like cholera or tapeworms that are not good. What else? Head louse, malaria, plague, liver flukes, pinworms. Athlete's foot. Some symbionts are mutualists. So a parasite consumes the tissues or body fluids of the organism which it lives, the host. Pathogens are parasites that cause diseases, and parasites typically harm but do not immediately kill the organisms they eat. So typically parasites have a vested interest in keeping their host alive, so they want to suck, sometimes literally, enough blood to stay alive, but not enough to actually kill the organism. So they're kind of obviously the examples we're talking about, they ultimately kill the host, but there's examples where they don't. One second. And we can define parasites as big or small. Macroparasites, large species such as arthropods or worms. Microparasites, again, using the micro-macro definition of I can see with my naked eye, or micro, I need a microscope to see it. So microparasites would be things like bacteria. Parasites can include herbivores such as aphids or nematodes that feed on one or few host plants. And parasitoids, this is a crazy one, parasitoids, insects whose larvae feed on a single host and almost always kill it. And there's a couple of parasitoid examples where basically the egg is laying in a host and then develops on that host eats it from the inside out. Again, generally kind of gross stuff here. Most species are attacked by one or more kind of parasites. Even parasites have parasites, so that old adage, even fleas have fleas. Many parasites are closely adapted to the particular host species, and this specialization helps explain why there's so many species of parasites. So because of the intricate life histories of a parasite and how they really want to prolong their experience with that host, they tend to start to adapt to or specialize in a single host or a suite of closely related hosts. This is a study in Britain. In the study in Britain, most host species were found to harbor more than one parasite. The number of parasite species is shown here for fish, birds, mammals, and all mammals includes anything with so they're only looking at one specific type of parasite, so it's likely an underestimate. So mammals, trees having many of them, it kind of makes sense. I mean, trees are large and long-lived. Mammals having more than birds. A fair amount of moths and butterflies, which is kind of surprising. A fair amount of beetles as well. I'm kind of shocked there's so few for fish, because often fish will have a lot of worms, and then there's the parasitic copepods that can replace the tongue. I don't know. You'd think that there'd be more with fish. But maybe it's, things like for a life history strategy, like mammals might be easier because they tend to group together, so it's easier to spread from one to another, where fish do have to move through the open water, which makes it a bit harder. There's a broken y-axis here, so that's not just a bit more. This is 15, and this is 15, and this is 95. Ectoparasites live on the outer body or surface of the host. Plant ectoparasites include dodder and mistletoe. So we talked about dodder in mistletoe in Chapter 5. Fungal parasites include mildews, rust, and smuts. Aphids, whiteflies, scale insects, beetles, nematodes, etc. Can be considered both herbivores and parasites. Here's an example of this is a fungus. The corn smut fungus growing here on the ear of a corn. So the fungus is all this stuff here. So it's feeding off. So the difference between like a fungus eating a decaying corn and this one is it's feeding off the energy from the corn itself. And so fungi typically are consuming decayed material. Here they're getting energy directly from the corn. Ectoparasites include athlete's foot, fleas, ticks, lice, mites, etc. And some of these parasites also transmit disease. This is a wide variety of parasites that live on the outer surface of their host, feeding on host tissues. We talked about the corn smut fungus. This is a velvet mite, which in its larval form feeds parasitically on the blood of insects. This is a sawfly larvae. So there's all these mites sucking the blood of this larval fly, maggot or caterpillar. Ugh. Many pathogens are endoparasites. They don't eat the host tissues, but they rob the host of nutrients. Tapeworms attach to the host's digestive wall and absorb the digested food. So the tapeworm is not sucking nutrients out of you, but it's stealing already digested food in your intestine. Some live in the host tissues and cells. Yersinia pestis is a bacterium that causes the plague. And Mycobacterium tuberculosis is the bacterium that causes tuberculosis. Bacterium is technically how you speak of one species of bacteria. So there's lots of bacteria in the world. A species of bacterium is Yesterina pestis. Plants also have endoparasites. Bacterial pathogens cause soft rot. Fungi can rot various plants from the inside out. Some bacteria invade vascular tissues and disrupt flow of water and nutrients, causing wilting and death. Ugh. That's just gnarly looking. I mean, ugh. That's the tapeworm. It uses suckers and hooks to attach to the intestinal wall of its mammalian host. Rodents, rabbits, cats, once attached, it can grow to be over 16 feet long. Ooh. This is Mycobacterium tuberculosis that causes the lung disease tuberculosis that today is killing 1 to 2 million people a year. And this is a section of potato tuber showing the soft rot. So if you, or like potato blight, similar to that. So this is causing decay and developing a distinctive foul odor as it decays from the inside out. Ectoparasites disperse more easily than endoparasites, and this makes sense. If you live on the outside of an organism, it's easier to hop and move from one host to another. Where endoparasites have evolved various mechanisms for dispersal, including complex life cycles and enslavement of hosts. You can think back to the trematode, snail, frog, bird thing. Like it's an endoparasite. It has this like really complex life history strategy. And some parasites of the alimentary canal are dispersed in feces. Alimentary canal's mouth through rectum. Ectoparasites are more exposed to predators, parasites, and parasitoids. Endoparasites are protected from the external environment and have easy access to food, but they might be attacked by the host immune system. So if you're an ectoparasite, there's examples of like a bird that like picks parasites off of something else. There's like cleaner shrimp will do things like that. There's the other, if you're on the outside, you can get picked off and removed. If you're on the inside of something, an endoparasite, once you find a good host, life is generally pretty good. Oh, okay. That's just a quick one for the first part here. This is a longer chapter, so we'll have a couple sections here.